Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm attorney John Redmann.
And hello everyone, I'm Shauna Sanford. Welcome to the show. Equality for women and minorities in the legal profession has come a long way, but the picture isn't all rosy. Today, women make up 31% of all lawyers, but Catalyst, the nonprofit research group for women's rights, reports that within law firms in 2011, women comprised 20% of partners and only 2% were women of color. So what's going on here and what can be done to improve the numbers? That's the focus of our show, and we are very excited to have Dean Maria Pabon Lopez of Loyola Law College as our guest today.
Our guest today is breaking barriers for women and minorities in the legal arena. Dean Lopez knows well the kinds of challenges women and minorities face in this profession. In just a moment, we will talk with her about overcoming those issues.
And she certainly has a lot to say about it, so I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have with her. But John, you've been in this profession for over 20 years, and based on your experience and what you've seen up close, would you say that women and minorities in particular really are being treated unfairly in the legal profession?
Well, the statistics don't lie. I mean, it is a fact that with so many minorities and women that have entered the profession over the years, and in the last 15 years, we'll be talking about it, 50% of all law students have been women, and a big jump in minorities there's been a big jump in minorities in law schools. You don't see anything close to an equal proportion of women and minorities in leadership positions. That's an issue. That's a big concern, and it needs to be addressed. And Dean Lopez is one of those women who has been a leader, and she can speak with authority about it. And I'm looking forward to that discussion on this show and next.
And so am I. And coming up next, Loyola Law School Dean Maria Pabon Lopez. So stay tuned. We'll be back after this. Well, given the strides that women have made in the workforce, some may think that they have arrived in the legal profession. But you better think again. The glass ceiling is still a major barrier. More women are going to law school, but they still make up less than 20% of partners at major law firms around the country. And you can count on one hand how many women and minorities head up law schools in this country. So what can be done to reverse this?
2 years ago, Dean Lopez made history by becoming the first woman to be selected as a dean at a Louisiana law school, and one of only a few Latinos to be put at the helm of any law school in the country. She is a prolific author, expert on immigration law and diversity issues, and has been awarded many honors within the legal profession. Dean Lopez, thank you so much for being with us here today for this very important discussion. We're delighted to have you here. Let's start the conversation, shall we?
Thank you, yes.
Women and minorities in leadership positions in the law. That's a big topic. But you know a lot about it, don't you?
I've had an opportunity to study women in the legal profession, and of course, the experiences of minorities in the legal profession. I'm researching deeply into it right now.
Yeah. In 1988, the American Bar Association reported that there was a great deal of gender discrimination within the legal profession. Is that still the case today?
What we have is, again, that women are 50% of the law school students, but they don't comprise 50% of judges or of partners, as you said, or of any of the leadership positions in the law profession. So you have to wonder, why is this, right? So
they're nowhere near 50%.
No.
And they didn't just become 50% of the student population starting last year. This has been going on for a while, hasn't it?
It's been over 15 years, something like 17 or 18 years that we've had 50% women law students, yes.
So why is there this big disconnect? What's happening between graduation and the workforce?
Sure, I think that what we have is issues with mentoring of young women lawyers, and issues with when they become mothers and coming back into the workplace. The business community does what they call on-ramping. There's a very deliberate job in having the women come back to a profession. In the legal profession, it doesn't quite happen that way. And I think a combination of the lack of mentoring, a combination of the issues regarding maternity, and the demands of the law professor and law practicing work hours have made it that women are not achieving then at the levels that men are.
Yeah. Well, you brought some slides with you that we're going to go ahead and put up so that we can see exactly what the numbers are. And our first slide, we're going to take a look at what actually is going on here in Louisiana. And this is from the Louisiana State Bar Association. And we're going to go ahead and pull that up so that you can see. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Right. This was an informal survey done in the year 2012, self-reported. And what we show there is that 85% of the membership is white, right? Because one of the things, again, it's women and it's ethnic diversity. So this is a slide that addresses ethnic diversity. Our second largest segment there in the blue are African Americans at 7%. And then you have the other different breakdowns for Native Americans, other Hispanic, and Asian American.
Right.
And it might be hard for you to read on your screen there, but Hispanics, according to this survey, is 1.7%, Asian Americans 0.3%. It's not the most scientific survey. 783 did this voluntary survey, and we're not sure. There's tens and tens of thousands of practicing lawyers. So it's hard to say exactly how scientific it is.
It's just a snapshot, is what it is. And of course, with the gender numbers, we have those there, and we have about 14,000 male lawyers in Louisiana and about 7,400, right?
Right. So almost twice as many male lawyers as female. But by contrast, today, and for the past, you said 17 or 18 years, it's been about half women and half men in the law schools.
Absolutely. And what we have nationwide is 70-30, right?
Right.
So we, at the nationwide level and at the Louisiana level, the 50% hasn't made it to the practicing lawyers.
Yeah, and we were talking before we started filming, that's because up until 17, 18 years ago, not that many women were applying to law school, getting into law school. That's a whole other discussion. But lawyers who've been practicing 30, 40, 50 years, they were in a population mostly of men. So that might account for the big differences in the numbers you see in that statistic, 2/3 men, 1/3 women versus 50% women, 50% men in law schools for the last 16, 17, 18 years, correct?
That's right.
We got some more slides. Maybe we can bring those up and we can talk about other snapshots of what's going on.
That's right.
Let's talk about this leaky pipeline statistic. This comes from California. Why don't you tell us what that reveals?
Yes, what we have is when you start with high school sophomores and you have 100% of them there.
That's on the far left of your screen as you're facing the screen. What do you have there?
And then as you get to graduation, you see, and I think we've heard about this, right? Statistics about minorities graduating less from high school. So those numbers start to drop. You see the Hispanic numbers already not even near the 80%. By the time you get to enrollment in post-secondary education, you're already for the red line at 40%, Hispanic as an example, but you could do African American just a little bit above in the green. And as you keep this pipeline down, you go to post-secondary 4-year, and then look at the statistic to obtain a BA degree and how far down that goes then, where again Hispanics are under the 20%, African Americans right there, to the you would need to go to law school, right? A postgraduate degree. You need.
What it says PG degree, that's postgraduate. And it might be hard to read on your screen. The red line represents the Hispanic trajectory. The green is black or African American. The black line is white or Caucasian, and the blue is Asian, correct?
And these are California statistics.
And that's very important that we point this out. This is for California. In fact, the next few slides that we're going to see are all from California, where there are more women and minorities there who are involved in law, and much more progressive state is seen as a much more progressive state. And so this is a place where we're looking to see where things are improving, I guess, would you say?
Well, that's it's at least here we have a snapshot of how the pipeline is starting, and then of course as you go through the next few slides, you'll see that there is definitely progress from the time where women weren't allowed to practice law until around after World War I, right? So it's not even a century yet, But so there's progress, and we know the issues with segregation. But the question is, how much progress?
How much progress, right?
Are we there? And I think these statistics will say we're not really there.
Well, let's take a look at the next slide. This is for gender in all courts, and these are recent stats that we're looking at for the year 2012, and this is for the California courts total. So tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so this is in the judiciary in California, where you have a 68.7% male and 31.3% female.
And we should point out that these are judge positions in California, and we did some checking. Judges in California are appointed. These are not people elected, and it might make a difference if they were elected. Again, this is anecdotal. We can't say this is the most scientific, what would happen if they were elected versus appointed, but it's just an interesting statistic.
And Dean Lopez, can you talk a little bit about why it's so important, though, that we do have female judges in these positions?
Well, that's an excellent point, which is when you are, for example, having arguments about points of law in front of a bench that has some experience in certain areas, for example, regarding family law matters, motherhood, childbirth issues, you really would like a woman judge listening to this. Some years ago, there was an argument in front of the United States Supreme Court about searching and seizure of a young woman. And one of the justices, I think Ginsburg, had made a point about, well, this is a search of
Ginsburg, who's a lady.
About a 14-year-old girl in a school. And having that viewpoint of a woman on the bench or of other diverse areas on the bench is very important for the administration of justice. So our courts accurately reflect the complexity and diversity of our own society here in the United States.
And also just to let other people out there who are deciding what they want to do with their own lives to know that there's a woman judge. I can do that too one day, right?
Absolutely. That is so true. The role model aspect of having women leaders, minority men and women leaders, so that we move beyond the days when it was, all white men in the judiciary, in leadership, in law, etc.
On a personal note, was that the case for you?
I am the first woman dean selected here
Right.
in Louisiana. Here it was an incredible honor. I really wasn't aware when I got the job offer that I would be the first woman to hold this position. So I'm very honored. But other states had women deans for quite a bit of time. So 2.5 years ago when I did it, I was very honored to be the first woman dean and first Latina or Latino in any deanship also here in the state of Louisiana.
Well, before we go to our first break, let's go through the rest of the slides that you brought for us. And again, this is a snapshot at diversity, ethnic diversity there at courts in California.
So here you have in California that, again, in a pie chart, about 3/4 are Caucasian judges, and then you have Asians, the dark blue, at about 100 of the 1,000. So obviously a small percent. African American at 101 of this sample. Latino is the highest one there at 138. And then mixed race and others with no information. And did you see there's no Native American that they reported?
Wow.
So, again, there's some diversity in the courts in California. But obviously not enough. Right?
Not enough, right? Okay, and I think that we're going to have to take a break. We have just a couple more slides. Perhaps we'll get to those as soon as we get back from our break. But coming up next, we're going to continue our conversation with Dean Lopez, and we're going to include your questions. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Well, lots of you out there are anxious to ask Dean Maria Lopez a variety of questions about women in the law, and we're going to get to those in just a few moments. But we want to finish up with the slides that you brought because they're very interesting and really tell the story of women and minorities in the legal profession. And the slides that you brought, we want to be very clear. This is what's going on in California. Very progressive state, more women, more minorities involved in the law there. And we're taking a snapshot, a look at what's happening there. And this slide that we have up is about diversity within the district courts of appeal there.
Right, and so you have here again where of 100 sitting justices, so that's a good, you're 100%. You have 79 who would be Caucasian, and then one of the two categories other and the no info, but then you would have 6 mixed race, 3 Asian Pacific, 5 African American, and 5 Latino.
Yeah.
So you would still see it's quite large, the number of male, probably white, definitely white, and definitely probably male judges. And again, that goes back to our previous point about the face of justice, right, of who's administering justice in the United States, and using California as an example.
Yeah.
Well, let me jump in here. I think one of the really nice things we can say, and California, as progressive as it is, it appoints its judges. And in contrast, in Louisiana, we elect our judges, and our judges face the population, and they have to be reelected. We historically just elected our first African American woman chief judge, Burnett Johnson, and well, she was already elected, but she just ascended to the after a little bit of a court battle to the chief justice position, and that's very historic. And the rest of the world was looking at this, and it's talk about your role models and talk about your women leaders and minority leaders, but we've had women chief justices already in place, African American chief justices in place for years now, and we have many minorities in our courts of appeals, and many women judges in our courts of appeals, and I bet our statistics are better than California's. I haven't done the math, I haven't checked it out, but that's something we can be proud of, and I think we owe that to our voters, and that's a really good thing. I think it's something to look into, but that's something that our voters deserve credit for. And certainly New Orleans, which is majority African American voters, put most of those judges on that bench. But African Americans have been elected from all over the state, and that's something we can be proud of. And we are an example for the nation, I would say.
Absolutely. We also have in the federal judiciary and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals appointed Carl Stewart,
Absolutely.
first African American chief judge of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals,
That's
which is
huge.
just one step under the U.S.
And he
Supreme
was
Court.
at Judge Burnett Johnson's swearing in, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
'cause I was
and a
there.
graduate of Loyola.
And Loyola grad.
So that's why.
Very
and
important.
All right,
Justice
I didn't mean to sidetrack from. We still had a little.
We have one more
One
slide
more.
we have one more slide, and this really gives us a look at what's going on in the private sector.
Right, and what you have there compared to the population, and they're using again statewide for California, where you have 59% minorities in the population. Look at the percentages of firm partners, only 4%, and of law firm associates, 14%. So obviously sharp declines in the proportion. And if you have them broken down, you see them there on the slide. For Latinos make 37%, 38% of the statewide population there in California, and they're only 1% of law firm partners, 3% of associates. So it's disproportionate, and you can see the African
A lot of work to
American.
be done there.
There's a lot of
progress left
need
to be made.
for the diversification of the legal profession, and unfortunately, we continue to have to struggle with it, right? Because we're just not there yet.
Well, Dean, there are lots of folks who have lots of questions for you, so we're going to go ahead to our viewer questions, and our first one comes from Javier, and Javier says, are big law firms forced by law to select an equal number of male and female partners?
No, right? That's the private practice of law, and so the partnership is selected by the partners as they see fit.
Yeah.
So what we have is that, that's where the partnership, women lag in it and minorities lag in it. What I will say, some bar associations there in California, as an example, have had the big firms sign commitments to increase the number of minority and women partners. So that kind of thing, where it's a voluntary statement. And I know here in Louisiana, the state bar has also tried to get diversity statements signed by the different firms. Don't recall the exact language of the diversity statements, and if they would be requiring a number of partners, I doubt it. But I sure know that there's a lot of expressions of interest by the big law firms to try and diversify what they do in terms of their own internal staffing.
Is this the kind of conversation that law schools are having with female students? Do female students understand the reality of what awaits them once they graduate?
Well, I'll be honest, law students are pretty busy studying for their finals and, preparing and all that. So where they would find this out much more, women and minorities, it happens more in the mentoring phase as their professors mentor them. As, for example, when I've done research on these topics, it's my law student research assistants who realize, wow, these are the things I'm going to face. And to be honest, it gets a little, they get a little discouraged. And I say, no, you can do it, you know, and this is precisely the point. You graduate and you make a difference in the legal profession.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because we are talking about the problems, but and some people may be feeling a little bit discouraged, but really they shouldn't be.
No, because there's no point in just saying, here's a problem and it's intractable, there's no solution. There are always solutions. These are human beings and this is justice, right? And so whether it be in the private practice of law, like the question by Javier, or in other areas, there's always an opportunity to try and make this better.
Right. Okay. Our next question comes from Jamie, who says, how do majority female law firms perform as compared to male-dominated firms?
I don't know that there's a lot of data about these majority female law firms. I know they're small. There's only one or two here that I'm familiar in New Orleans, and they seem to be doing very, very well. But I don't know that the numbers are so small. I'm familiar with also in the medical field, all women doctor practices. I used to go to one myself back in the day, and you know, practicing medicine, practicing law in ways. Early on, when women joined the legal profession, there was going to be a question about, well, women changed the practice of law, and the same in the medical field. So I think, anecdotally, pretty successful.
Yeah, I'll just mention this too. I have never seen anything that says that women versus men, anybody does anything any better. And honestly, a good judge is going to look at the content of the briefs. That is the legal arguments that are prepared. And frankly, it just, let me toot my own horn here. In my own law firm, I've got a majority of minorities, and I've got women associates that work at my firm, and women and minorities as associates and as support staff. And we make a much better team because it's like a tapestry. Everybody contributes, and I get such great help in my firm. But anytime you go to court, it's the best legal arguments that win the day. And hopefully, you know, whatever firms are considering hiring somebody out there, consider the content, consider what's on the paper, consider the quality of the work that's provided, the samples, the legal samples, the writing samples. Hire the person who does the best job.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, we're going to try to get in a few more questions. Next question comes from Maria, who says, what can be done to increase female membership in leadership positions in the law?
I think that goes to the mentoring, where I'm very fortunate. I was mentored by my torts professor when I was in law school, and she kept saying, you need to be a law professor. You need to be involved in the legal academy. Of course, I didn't listen. I went off and practiced law for 10 years. But in the back of my mind, her words were always, oh, you know, I should. And I did join the legal academy and now the law dean profession. But I will say, it's got to be very intentional. Just thinking that, women will rise on their own over time. It's going to take a long time, and it's a lot more important to be intentional, deliberate, put mentoring programs into place, and put all kinds of awareness, like we're doing on this show, so people know, these women graduates know, it's not an easy road, but you can do it.
What advice do you have for that woman law student out there, or that minority law student, or somebody thinking about going to law student about taking that path, that more challenging path, to be a leader versus just a follower?
Well, certainly they need to be prepared to knock on many doors, and if the doors are closed, keep knocking on others that will open, because you do need a lot of persistence. Things won't be given automatically. The opportunity is going to be there, and you just have to keep addressing how to make yourself better to meet all those opportunities and address the challenges. Women in particular have to be aware that our profession still would have some potential limitations. A young woman associate who is doing a case with a partner that has out-of-town trips, that could be something to be aware of. So just having conversations with senior women who have had experiences like that, because the truth is, asking questions and getting as much information to what you're going to encounter is the best way to be prepared.
Well, we're going to continue to ask you questions. You're going to stick around for part 2 of our show, and we are looking forward to digging just a little bit deeper into some of the problems and your story in particular, and some of the solutions that you see to the issues that are still plaguing the legal profession when it comes to diversity, be that gender or race. So we are going to have to say goodbye for right now. That's all the time that we have for this episode, but be sure to join us next time for another great discussion about the law with Dean Lopez.
Thanks for watching and supporting the show, and for following us online, Facebook and Twitter. If you want to learn more about today's topic or see past shows, visit us online at johnredmondpoa.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on John Redmann, Power of Attorney.